My pleasure to be here with Jim Ramsey. Jim is the statistician at the PPA. He's the grand poobah of all the numbers at the PPA, Professional Pickleball Association. Jim, it's always great to see you. How are you doing today?
Thank you. I'm having a great day. I'm glad to be here.
Better day now that you're with us, Jim. I know that because me, and CJ just spent some time chatting, and that's always a lot of fun. So,
Yeah.
Jim and I are fans of numbers. I know Jim's a fan of numbers because he spends a lot of time analyzing them. I don't spend quite as much time as Jim in the weeds and the numbers, but I can tell you that I love the numbers as well. If you've heard anything that we do at Better Pickleball and things like that, we love using numbers. Jim, I put this thing behind us for us, the hard data on the board if you're watching this on a video. And there's a pun intended there because these numbers are in fact hard and fast. In fact, Jim and I were talking about like conceptual stuff, and Jim said, well, we got to count the numbers, which I agree with. But the other part of this is that the data has some hard messages for you. And Jim, we're going to get into those today. So Jim, tell us a little bit about, let's talk just real general, briefly about what it is that you do what you're doing with the PPA, with the statistician role, how you're studying matches and things like that.
I count shots and categorize shots. In broad terms, I'll count things like third shots, drops versus drives, clean winners, serve, return, and third shot errors, dinks into the net. Even things like ATPs and ATPs defended and earnings. Like, I try to put out that big buffet of everything that's going on to shed a spotlight on what's actually happening in the game to make a little bit more sense of it.
And it's a wonderful service you're doing, Jim. And I would push back a little bit. I mean, I think it's to say that you just count numbers, not kind of shots. You formulate the way you're going to do it and the framing of the shots that matter and things like that. So it's a lot of value that you're adding to this process. And Jim, what I wanted to do today for this podcast, and we've talked about this prior to getting on, is, what we wanted to do is chat with I wanted to chat with Jim about errors and understanding how we can use data, both to understand the impact of errors in terms of how it impacts play. And we're going to get into that with Jim in a little bit, some of the data he's teased out from the professional matches. But importantly, as a player, it's important for us as players to be able to take action, right? We CJ and I always think about things in terms of, are things actionable? Is the metric actionable? Is the data actionable? Is something we can do about it? And the more you can act on those metrics, the better you'll be able to play using the data from your own games. And this is, if you follow the 3 pillars of pickleball, this is part of the athletic pillar of pickleball, which is that mind part, super important. So Jim, let's dive into, let's start talking about the difference between some actionable metrics and maybe some that I would characterize them as not actionable. I believe that you have another concern with that particular metric in terms of just its, how do you determine what is and isn't. So let's dive into unforced errors, because that's, when you talk about errors, I think players, most of the time, they equate error with, like, they put the word unforced in front of it and say, okay, that's what I need to count. So let's talk about that a little bit. How do you view unforced errors in the game, Jim, in terms of ability to analyze them and use them?
Well, the phrase unforced errors is something that has come over from tennis. And when two players on a tennis court are 60 or 80 feet apart, it's a lot easier to say he could have got that or he should have got that. Pickleball, when players can be 14 feet and sometimes less apart from each other and such a bang, it's very hard to be objective about, was it forced, an error that's forced or unforced. So I tend to stay away from that and try to categorize things that are more objective, such as third shot into the net, third shot long, dink into the net, mistakes that are, there will be little or no argument about how it's interpreted.
Yeah, that makes sense, Jim. And our additional limitation that we think in the term unforced errors is we don't view it as being actionable because we don't see what you can do with that information. If I tell you I had eight unforced errors yesterday, 8 unforced errors today, and I'll have 8 unforced errors tomorrow, that just tells you I had 8 unforced errors each time. But it doesn't tell you, like, okay, Tony, next time you play, maybe, respect the net a little more, because I didn't tell you I hit the net. I didn't tell you they went long. I didn't tell you they went wide. And so or I didn't tell you I whiffed him or mishit it or something, so I'm not focused on the ball. So that, you know, there's really nothing you can do with that information from our perspective. So we're not fans of that metric or that way of looking at data. And, you know, it sounds to me like you're also looking at information. And to be clear, I mean, Jim's role as a statistician isn't just to suss out information from the matches he's watching to help, you know, 3-5 pickleball players improve their play. There's a bigger picture to what Jim is doing. But it sounds like, Jim, you're regardless of the reason why you're trying to gather the data, you are gathering data you're trying to gather data that is objective, like all hit net off of this shot, therefore that fits into this box of data. Right. Okay. Go ahead, Jim. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it might be something as simple as you're watching a match and there's a really long rally, and it's like, okay, how long was that rally? No, I'm the guy who can go back in there and tell you it was 87 shots, and it's the longest rally in a gold medal match this year. So I do try to find some things that will help the PPA website, their writers, their broadcasters. I give them information previewing a tournament leading up. I do all the stats during the gold medal matches, and that comes out after the tournaments. So it's kind of a comprehensive thing to try to bring more numbers and value into the statistics like we see in other sports. And I think eventually pickleball as a pro sport will get up to that kind of level where in-match statistics and just computer-based statistics will be way easier to get and to understand. It'll just be a part of the game.
That'll be a heck of a time, right? When you're watching a Colin Johns match and it says Colin Johns, you know, dink percentage is, you know, 97.6%. And so, you know, things like that. Sort of like free throws in basketball or, you know, on base percentage for a batter, things like that, right?
Yeah, just think of your favorite sport and all the graphics that go across the bottom of the screen. When pickleball gets to that level, people who love the numbers like us, we will kick back and smile because that's going to be a great day.
And you'll have Jim Ramsey will be at the bottom of that totem pole of people who are putting that information together. So that's awesome. Let's talk about, and you shared this data with me before, and it's an area of the game that it's players. Listen, anybody listening to this knows that if I hit the ball into the net, it is bad. Okay, I get that, but I don't know that they fully appreciate the depth of the issue of hitting the ball into the net and how it affects their game, the pervasiveness of that information. And so I shared with Jim, and I'm going to share here real quick a piece of data from it's a very small sample size, but it's a good example of what normally happens. This was a 4.5 match on a video that we broke down at Into Pickle, a game we broke down, a 4.5 play. They played 18 rallies at the beginning of their game that we were breaking down. And of the 18 rallies, 12 ended with a ball into the net. That's 67% of the balls into the net. Now, Jim has some really good statistics, so I'm going to let him share. That'll show you how the net is a predictor is a really good predictor, actually, of the likely winner of a match. So, Jim, do you mind sharing those stats that you shared with us about the net and the percentages of winning?
Sure. As a recreational player myself, one of the things that I enjoy doing is seeing what are some of the statistics that I can get from the pro game, and then what does it mean to the recreational player? What can that player learn from it to better his or her own game? So something like simply volleys into the net, super easy to categorize and watch. The first 13 PPA tournaments of the year, the 39 gold medal matches. The team that hit fewer volleys into the net during that entire match, which could be 3 games up to 5 games, that team won 72% of those gold medal matches. So yes,
that's a crazy number.
Like your 67% stat, keeping the ball out of the net is paramount. But then when we can tweak it a little bit and say, well, there's more to it than just keeping it out of the net. For instance, your resets and play in the transition zone, Tony, has to be on point to continue those rallies to have a chance to to come out on the winning end.
Yeah, and I definitely want to have that conversation because we were exploring that earlier, and I told Jim, let's table that for a second. Let's talk about it on the air because I think it's going to be a really interesting conversation about, analyzing the net versus your transition play. But Jim, what about you had a stat also on dinks, as I recall, that was really interesting as well because they basically compounds, right? So it's like the team. Now this one had net or wide, I think, but it's a similar concept of just, because a wide dink is a dink that wasn't, I believe, not aimed properly because you didn't have enough margin. But go ahead and tell us that one if you can.
Yeah, I also keep track of dinks into the net or dinks that are wide. I try to usually just say it's like a regular dink, a dink that I expect a pro to make, not one where they're lunging greatly or they're any kind of undue duress. But when the pros hit dinks into the net or wide, the team that has fewer bad dinks in a gold medal match wins 77% of the time. So that's definitely a rally killer on the pro level.
Oh, yeah. And give us the cumulative one, because the cumulative one really kind of blew my mind.
Yeah, this is a great one. I think a lot of the rec players' ears will perk up when they hear this. So in those 39 gold medal matches, which generally are even competition, so you expect it to be a good sample size, the team with fewer dinks into the net or wide, plus fewer volleys into the net, those two things compounded. Those 39 matches, the team that did that fewer won 91% of the matches. 32 wins, 3 losses, and you throw away the 4 ties. 91% of the matches stay out of the net.
Yeah, that's a crazy number, and it really shows you. So if you take the data from which again was a small sample size, but just check yourself. This is an area where you can start using, the listener can start using data to help your game, because if you can honestly track how many of your rallies ended in the net, and you can just put your camera anywhere on the court. You don't even have to put it on a tripod. Just lay it on a backpack that you can see how the rallies end. Just take a note of how many times the rallies end with the ball into the net. It's going to be a high percentage. And then use the data that Jim just shared with you to tell you, okay, if you can reduce the number of times that you're doing that, the likelihood is that you're going to end up winning, just because numbers don't lie. I mean, that's just how it is. So that's really useful data, Jim. Let's touch briefly on the subject that we were talking about earlier before we started recording about the transition zone, because you were talking about kind of a, like, it's not just clearing the net, because if you just clear the net and you get smashed, there's a corollary to that, or a next thing you got to consider. So let's talk about that, and then I have I'll express my position, then we're going to move on to get past 4.
Okay, we'll take the starting point of you're keeping your shot out of the net. Maybe it's a 3rd shot, 4th, whatever. Part of the reason that's such a high percentage on the pro level is really for 2 things. The pros are so good in the transition zone with their resets. And they're also super smart about being in the proper position in order to make their next shot. Similar, in a pro match, if a player or his teammate hits say like hits a lob or hits a ball that's a semi-lob that's too high, a mistake, you'll see that player quickly backpedal 2 or 3 steps and then brace for the next coming shot. In rec play, when your partner pops one up by mistake, they're often not backing up like that. So the pros are great. As soon as they recognize what your opponent's next shot is likely to be, they're already taking steps to be in the proper position. Because position, decision, execution are the 3 main things that go into a shot. And the pros are great at all of them, of course. And we can learn a little bit on how to improve our play by thinking about those aspects of the mental part of the game.
Absolutely, Jim. Thanks for sharing that. That's so true. And I would suggest to you that what I see is that not only do rec players not back up when the ball gets popped up, they actually continue moving forward. If they're still moving forward, they'll keep going forward into the teeth of the attack. And so, I think the idea that, our position at CJ and my position at all the coaching we do is the net is the only unbeatable opponent. And Ben Johns can't beat the net, and Lee can't beat the net. No one can beat the net. And so we always, if you give me the choice, my choices are two. I can either drop it into the net or get smashed. I'll take a smash every single time. And, and the reality is at the rec level, I mean, how many times do the smashes get hit, 4 feet out or get dumped into the net, So at least I have some chance, or I can defend it and I get better on my defense. So yeah, definitely but the net, I think, is, the takeaway I think that I want our listeners to walk away with here is that you got to get the net out of your play. Just get it out of your play. All right, Jim, let's pivot. Let's pivot over to this metric that I wanted to explore with you. And it's a metric that CJ and I developed this metric. We don't own the number 4. We don't own but we did develop this get past 4 metric as part of our pickleball system training because we wanted to get players, frankly, we wanted to get our students away from focusing on things like I popped the ball up, because our position is that not that pop-ups are irrelevant, they can be traumatic, but they're not why you're losing games, because the pros pop the balls up too. Everybody pops the ball up. Is simply inherent in our sport. But the reason the reason you're not winning as much as you want to, and the reason you're not playing as deep, is because you're not even getting past 4 to begin with. And so you need to get past 4 consistently. So Jim, let me tell you the metric, and then you kind of give me your thoughts on what you think about it, and we had a conversation about it. So the get past 4 metric is your serve, your return, the third, and the fourth. In other words, that all those 4 shots are successfully completed during a rally. And what we tell players is that, once you get past the first 4, it's not that nothing matters, but great, you're playing deeper into the rally. If, however, there's a mistake on one of the first 4, and it was your doing, in other words, your obviously has to be you have to have hit the ball. We want that to be elevated in terms of your alarm system needs to go off when you miss one of those first 4, because those are the ones that are really affecting how you play at the rec level. So I don't know, Jim, I don't really have a question. Just want to turn it over to you as a statistician and get your thoughts on what you think about that. Is it, is it something you think would be useful, or how do you feel about it?
I like it. I think what ties into that is just how alarmingly consistent the pros are on their serves, returns, and third shots. I do stats for all those for a year and a half. And when they're like 96, 97% accurate on keeping it in play, then yeah, their rallies are going to be onto the 4th, 5th, and 6th shot, whatever. The mixed doubles final a couple days ago averaged almost 13 shots per rally. The men's doubles final in Seattle averaged 15 shots per rally. So when you get past 4, you're at 4 shots, and when there's 160 rallies in a match, and they're going usually around 15 shots per rally, that's 11 shots where that's where the cat and mouse comes in. That's when the decision-making comes in. That's the patience. That's the plan. That's the focus. And that's really at that level where the match is won. So when you have, as a rec player, that solid foundation of serve, return, and third, and a good 4th shot, 4th shots can be a little bit underrated. You don't want to just dump in a little dink and give your opponent a free ride up to the kitchen line. Get it all the way to his feet. Make him work for it. It's not a bus pass. He's got to work. So
I like that. The bus pass.
Do the best you can to get your foundation of those first 4 shots as rock solid as you can, whatever level you're playing. And then the rest of the game and your options will open up greatly after that.
Jim, we're going to take this piece of the podcast and we're going to put it in our Pickleball System Facebook group, because that's the preaching right there. It's so important to hear that message about how important those shots are, and often overlooked by players who, frankly, I don't criticize the players. It's just a lot of it's the ecosystem that we're in. They just get distracted with the Ernie ATP roll shots, whatever, and their 4 shots are dumping into the net or going wide or being short, and you're just like, no, that one, don't worry about the other stuff. So really good stuff. Jim, let me ask you, I know that there's a lot of and thanks a lot for helping explain the your thought process on those shots. And one other thing I want to note before we close is that we tell our students and players who we work with that get past 4 is not a beginner metric, because every pro out there uses that metric. They just use it like it's just like breathing. Like I always tell players, I'm like, if you want to see a pissed off pro, don't look at them when they miss a put away. They're like, turn around. Okay, I missed a put away. Look at them when they dump a third shot into the net. Then they're like, oh, what in the world did I just do to me and my team, right? That's when they lose their mind. So anyway, Jim, let me ask you this. So there's players out there who want to know more about what you're doing and the statistical work you're doing. Can you give us, and I'll put it in the show notes as well. I know that they can follow the PPA tour and get the data, right when it's hot off the presses, they can watch it there. So if there's a way for them to do that. And then I believe, if I recall correctly, that you have a Facebook a group or a page where you post some information. So would you mind sharing that information?
I appreciate that. Thank you. If you're on Facebook, the Facebook group is called Pro Pickleball Stats. I have the gold medal matches for the PPA for a year and a half. And also sometimes I will do some research and try to find out what's going on behind the numbers and see how that can apply to help recreational players help better. So if you're in the group and you put the word study in the search box, you'll find a whole bunch of different articles that I've written about the decision-making and some of the things that you can what you can learn from the numbers to help you improve your game.
Awesome. Jim, really appreciate everything you're doing for the sport. Appreciate your efforts to help not just professionalize things, in terms of numbers, but also to give us information that we can then use to make intelligent recommendations and to continue to grow as educators for CJ and myself, and also as players for everybody who's out there and is learning from this. So Jim, thanks for joining us for the Pickleball Therapy Podcast, and appreciate everything you're doing.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on.